All right, welcome to the Two Sons podcast. Happy Wednesday, everybody. I hope all of you guys are having a great week so far. We are going to be covering the first book in the Thrawn Ascendancy series. What is the name of the first book? Do you remember?
I was hoping you wouldn't ask me that.
I think it's Chaos Rising.
I think it is Chaos Rising.
Yeah, because the second one is Greater Good. So first of all, before we get started, if you guys could subscribe to the YouTube channel, we'd sincerely appreciate it. Also, I have a link in the description of this video that takes you to all of our socials and feeds. If you guys could click that and follow all of our feeds, I'd really appreciate it as well. We will be back probably on Monday night with Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings, and then next Wednesday with Andor as well. And then I've already started the Greater Good book. Luke will probably be another month or so before we get to that, which is fine. But
give me 2 weeks.
I thought this was a really good book. I thought it was good too. It reminded me of the first book of the Thrawn trilogy.
Yeah.
What did you think of their memories method of like circling through Thrawn's past?
I thought it was tolerable. I mean, it wasn't like groundbreaking. It wasn't some crazy, enthralling aspect of the book, but I thought it was overall a really good touch just to provide more insight, not only to Thrawn, but also to the entire Chiss Ascendancy.
Oh, yeah. Admiral Ar'alani, all of the, what do they call them? The Aristocra?
The Aristocra and all the families, the 9 major families that play a role in essentially dictating all of Chisla and actually what the Chiss call their essentially their empire, right? Overall, I thought it was a really good book too. Timothy Zahn is the man.
He is the man.
He's created an ultimate character in the form of Thrawn and Admiral Ar'alani, and I thought it was really interesting to see how. So when I think of the Chiss, I think of them, or I did think of them as like a perfect race, like a perfect alien race that was somewhere off in the chaos that no one knew anything about, and
all of their beings are super smart and intelligent and all that stuff.
Yeah, and that's just not the case. We find out there's so much politics that is essentially binding the Chiss into making good decisions.
They're plagued by the same things that other societies are plagued by.
Exactly. Yep. And this book, spoilers, right? This book emphasizes on Thrawn's upbringing, essentially through their defense force, and then also it highlights Thrawn's complete inability to be successful in a political arena.
Yeah, that the consistent theme through all the 4 Thrawn books so far is the mixing between politics and military operations, which is literally never good.
Right.
And then jealousy of Thrawn and his success.
Right.
And because the two guys, it's Syndic Thurfian and then Syndic Sistalmo, I think, are the two that dislike Thrawn so much. And like they color it in their head as like we dislike Thrawn because he represents a danger to the Chiss Ascendancy because of the risks he's willing to take.
Right.
But the truth of the matter is it's jealousy.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing that happened when he was coming up through the Empire. And it makes sense. I mean, I feel like it's kind of a natural thing. We see it all over the place in life. And I mean, even I think we're all fooling ourselves if we don't pretend like we don't occasionally look at someone that's doing something in their life that you wish you did a little bit better.
Sure.
And you get I'm jealous. For instance, I'm jealous of the way you take care of your house.
I'm jealous
that
you have a podcast that has viewers.
We have a couple hundred consistent viewers. Come on, man, get yourself a little more slack. But yeah, like my point is like jealousy is a normal part of things, but like this is like an example of how it exists in the military,
right?
And then you see the politicians putting military members in their ranks because they're from famous families and the dangers that come with that. Is a lot of interesting stuff on that part. What did you think of Yiv the Benevolent?
He was an interesting character for sure. I'd like to see what he actually looks like in Timothy Zahn's eyes. I was Googling him and I couldn't find any images really.
Not even fan art?
No, I couldn't even find fan art really that I thought was the adequate. He was a really interesting character, and I think ultimately it's leading towards the Grisk just having everybody under their thumb, right? So with the Nick Ardoon, and then
oh, that's right, you did see him at the end. Okay, so did you listen to that epilogue?
Yes,
and with that guy, and his name is I can't even remember his name.
I forget his name, but
I wonder if he's Grisk too.
I think he's Grisk.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he's Grisk. And I know our viewers probably already know that answer, so stop freaking out. But I essentially think it's the Grisk just overtaking everything, or they're trying to overtake everything in the chaos. Right?
So I'm going to do a tiny spoiler for you because it's literally the opening scene of the second book.
Oh, really? Okay.
But that character, whose name I can't remember, he's orbiting a planet that is destroying itself. And him and his right-hand man, who's not of the same race but a different race, he is looking down, and he managed to foment a civil war on this planet, literally just by infiltrating and doing political stuff.
Yeah.
And they're both kind of like orbiting the planet, very self-satisfied with the way that they did so. And they also strongly hint that the Nicardun were under their control in some way, shape, or form. So there's definitely some hints that, one, the infiltrating the races and controlling them from the inside, and the having the races domineered beneath them. Those are two specific things that that kind of hint towards the Grisk. But I just don't see the point of introducing the Grisk in the Thrawn book or introducing them in this fashion here unless it's for that specific reason. And for the record, Thrawn does recognize the Grisk immediately with Anakin Skywalker and straight up says, like this is an entity that we've dealt with and that we consider to be a threat to the Chiss Ascendancy. Beyond that, he literally in the first Thrawn book tells Emperor Palpatine, quote unquote, like, there's stuff in the unknown regions that is more dangerous than anything that you're dealing with here.
Do you think we're ever going to see the Grisk as part of a more central mainstream aspect of Star Wars, like what we'd see in Andor?
So, but here's the thing. Like, we talked about this. If I believe that Thrawn's going to appear in Andor, we can be relatively certain he's going to appear in Ahsoka because of what Ahsoka says to the magistrate. So the reality is when Ahsoka finds him, the Empire is disbanded. Thrawn is not the type of guy to lead an Imperial remnant.
No.
So in theory, it will be, if she finds Thrawn, she will find Thrawn engaging in missions that he believes furthers the cause of the Chiss Ascendancy.
Yeah.
And if that is the case, the biggest threat would be the Grisk.
I would agree.
So, and also, like, they're looking for some sort of enemy, some sort of entity that is evil, that is different from the Sith Jedi concept. To me, it's kind of trending in that direction. But again, like, I could just imagine them being a very scary looking alien race to kind of like bring forward like a visceral response from the audience rather than like the kind of like wolf in sheep's clothing vibe that you get from the Sith sometimes, you know?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a response like what we get with like the orcs in Lord of the Rings.
Yes,
like when you
exactly.
Look at like an orc in Lord of the Rings, you're like, man, that guy's badass, right? Like I feel like that's what we're going to think when we see the Grisk.
Like warriors.
Warriors for sure. And I bet they're going to have some really cool ships if they do decide to, show them on a screen somewhere. The idea of Pathfinders and the idea of Skywalkers are exceedingly interesting to me as well, because essentially they're necessary for navigating any part of the chaos. And the reason why they call it the chaos, right, is because it's chaotic. There's been unstable star systems that you have to fly through on a regular basis.
The hyperlanes change.
The hyperlanes change. So no nav computer could do that efficiently. They have to take small jumps in order to get anywhere, which really increases the amount of time of travel. So then they use Pathfinders, and then they use Skywalkers in order to be able to circumvent that issue, right? So having stated that, though they have great efficiency, it shows you just the downsides of having an organic computer, which is organic computers in the form of Skywalkers. And in this case, essentially are 99% of the time young girls of the Chiss Ascendancy. They want to do stuff like draw in their quarters, and they want to do stuff like take breaks and eat junk food.
What a hilarious problem!
I know.
Like we literally need to employ full-time childcare for our navigators.
I know, and it's to the point where like even Admiral Arlani gets set with having to take care of Cheery.
Yeah,
and it's kind of funny because an admiral is leading battles, space battles, where there's life and death happening. And then afterwards, she goes into Cheerie's quarters and is like, what do you want to have for dinner? But then there's a flip side to that coin too, which is we meet the Pathfinder Guild, which I think is also a really cool concept.
What's the name of their thing that they're communicating with while they're, do you remember?
Oh,
Is it the Great Beyond?
Something along that. It's something vague.
Yeah.
The name of it's vague.
The Great Presence, I think is what it's called.
The Presence. Yeah, something like that. And they're sworn to secrecy, and these groups end up using them as navigators, but then they have to be sworn to secrecy, and then yet they're taken into battles, and the people who hire them do sketchy stuff. So it just shows the downside of having intelligence associated with your essentially they're a Navi computer that's alive, and then the huge downsides to that. And
navigating is just a huge pain in the butt out there.
It's a huge pain in the butt, and it makes sense that we haven't really seen them is because there would be no reason for you want to have a Pathfinder or a Skywalker in normal space, right? Or
because they have more structured. Yeah, well, exactly. They call it lesser space.
That's
what Thrawn calls it. Yeah.
So, which is an interesting take on what we know
lesser
as
space,
the Star Wars universe. So, that aspect of the chaos is intriguing to me.
I 100% agree. Well, it's interesting in a couple of different ways. Like they tell little details, like when they're in the when they're in hyperspace and the Skywalkers are navigating, like the people on the ship can feel the sways as the ship makes turns and stuff. Like you could see that being interesting, and like stupid stuff like if they want to go jump by jump because the Skywalker's tired or because they don't have access to a Skywalker because they're rare, it could literally take them like 5 days to travel what would be a couple hours in lesser space and things like that.
Right.
The big thing that I appreciated about that was the concept of force sensitivity as a navigation tool. And like, this is one of my favorite things about the expanded universe of Star Wars. And they dive into it starting with Clone Wars with like the Dathomirian Night Sisters. And you see it throughout in the High Republic too, where it's like, okay, this chick is super sensitive to music. This chick is super sensitive, or this guy's super sensitive to the ocean or whatever it is.
Right.
Like everybody has like their unique connection to the Force.
Yeah.
And it's like the Chiss, they have precognition. They can see things before they happen, which gives them the ability to navigate. And like literally these Pathfinders, the Pathfinder Guild, which helps other alien races navigate through the chaos, like they connect to something called like the Great Presence, which is essentially the Force. And I won't spoil it, but like early on you meet a race in the second book that has a different type of connection to this I think theirs is called the Great Beyond. I think that's why I'm confused. It's because one of the ladies like looks at what's Athalius is her name, the one who's the caretaker for Cheery. She's a former Skywalker. She looks at her and she's like, "You have touched the Great Beyond. I can see it in your eyes." And you're like, I just love how like every race and everybody just has like their own unique connection to the Force and their own unique relationship with the Force. One of my favorite things of just in the mystique of Star Wars.
I was just about to say that there's so much detail that gets placed into Star Wars and developing alien races. It's you've said it before in the past, and I think the word is perfect. Is there's like a sacredness to Star Wars,
absolutely, because
so much attention to detail is placed, which is why episodes 7, 8, and 9 suck of the movies, but we won't get into that.
Exactly. But yeah, to kind of put a bow on this, like this book was very similar to the first Thrawn book in the sense that it doesn't actually dive into the serious villain until the very, very end.
Right.
And the main purpose of it is to demonstrate some of Thrawn's backstory, to demonstrate some of the military and political dynamics, and to basically set the rules for the universe. And the main villain in Yev the Benevolent is very similar to the guy from the first Thrawn book. What was his name? Do you remember?
Oh my gosh, I don't know.
It's bothering me that I can't remember, but there's like a similar character in the first Thrawn book that's like clearly an intelligent guy that makes for an average foil for Thrawn, but Thrawn is like completely on top of the guy. And by the end, like the utter humiliating defeat of Yev the Benevolent was definitely hilarious.
Right. Yeah, he was an interesting character. He was kind of almost a lukewarm a lukewarm villain, and I think that was intentional.
I think so too.
By Timothy Zahn. I think that was there to show that there's something bigger controlling him.
Exactly,
which is exactly what it is.
And the main guy at the end, like, basically says as much. Like, Yiv's an idiot. Like, like, he's taking on the Chiss because he's an idiot. He was bound to fail.
The other aspect of the book that was surprising to me is there's a crossing of plots with the original Thrawn books series. With you meet Anakin Skywalker, and the interesting point that his name is Skywalker and the Chiss call their navigators Skywalkers, right? And how big of a part that plays into things, I don't really understand yet, but I'm sure it'll lead into things somewhat. I don't think they just sprinkle that in there just to have it, right? I assume it'll.
Well, there are a couple of different details. Like, basically in the second Thrawn book, Anakin Skywalker meets Thrawn, and he's got a companion with him on his ship that turns out to be a navigator. Well, they basically show that end of the story in this book from Thrawn's perspective. And the other interesting detail there is in the second Thrawn book, he has an opportunity to leave after he's accomplished his mission, which was to retrieve the Republic shield generator.
That's what it is. Okay, and that's how it plays into this plot.
Exactly. So he grabs the Rebel shield generator or the Republic shield generator and is like, "I'm leaving." And then Padme's like, "Screw you! Why would you leave? You should help us." And then he ends up staying and helping.
Yeah.
But he returns with a rebellion. How many times am I going to make that stupid mistake?
It's Andor Day.
Yeah, exactly. The Republic shield generator ends up being something that he utilizes to defeat Yiv the Benevolent at the end, which was the detail.
Yeah. So overall, I thought it was a great book. I thought it did a good job adding to Star Wars lore and the Star Wars universe.
Yep, and you can't get enough Thrawn.
No, Thrawn freaks,
dude, and he gets himself in. You can kind of see why the politicians dislike him with his behavior at the end of that book, because they value Skywalker so much, and he sends a Skywalker straight into Yiv's hands.
Yep.
Like, straight up, just
and
like
acts
hand,
like nothing happened.
And acts like nothing happened. And he, like, you can kind of see why the aristocrat are like, how does he keep getting away with this?
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
Did you have anything else in your notes?
No, that was it. I thought it was good.
All right, guys. As always, we sincerely appreciate your support, and we will see you in a few days for some Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones stuff.
Thanks a lot.